The chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, the chairman of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, Mr. Gowdy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Goodlatte. Director Ray, somewhere today, a group of our fellow citizens will be asked if they can be fair, impartial, free of bias before they sit in judgment of others on a jury. Even in the smallest of courtrooms where there are nothing but empty seats and no television cameras. Somewhere today, those selected to sit in judgment of their fellow citizens will be told that they must wait until the very last witness testifies and the last piece of evidence has been introduced before they can to deliberate on an outcome. So if our fellow citizens should be impartial and free of bias, and if our fellow citizens must wait until the last piece of evidence is introduced, the last witness is called, before they can reach a verdict, a conclusion, an outcome, then I don't think it's asking too much that the Department of Justice and the FBI do the same thing. There is no member of Congress who holds the department and the Bureau in higher esteem than I do. There are others who hold you in high esteem, but I would take second place to no one. And I have defended the department and the Bureau when, frankly, it was pretty damn lonely to do so. When my Democrat friends were asking that Jim Comey be prosecuted for a Hatch Act violation about this time last year, they now want him canonized, but this time last year they wanted him prosecuted for a Hatch Act violation. When your predecessor sat right where you're sitting and was embroiled in a fight with this little tiny startup company called Apple, I was on the side of the Bureau. When there are calls for special counsel, even today, I reject them because I trust the women and men of the Department of Justice and the Bureau, the professionals that we hired to do their job. And the vast majority of line prosecutors and line agents are exactly what you described in your opening statement. They are exactly what you described. But unfortunately, the last 2 years have not been good years for the Bureau, and they have not been good years for the department. We had an attorney general meet with the spouse of a target of an investigation on the tarmac and asked that an investigation be called something other than an investigation, but be called a matter. We've had an attorney general recuse himself from the largest, most significant investigation currently in his office. We had the director of the FBI appropriate a major charging decision away from the Department of Justice because he was concerned that the public wouldn't have confidence if the Department of Justice handled that decision themselves. We had an FBI director write 2 politically volatile letters weeks before an election. We had an FBI director memorialize conversations he had with the President of the United States because he didn't trust the President's recall of those conversations. And I think what frustrates some folks is when Director Comey wanted special counsel for President Trump, he leaked one of those memos. When he didn't have confidence in Loretta Lynch, we didn't hear a word about it. There were no leaks that prompted special counsel when he didn't trust Loretta Lynch. There were leaks when he decided he didn't trust President Trump. We've had an acting AG fired. We've had the director of the FBI fired. And we can't manage to find prosecutors who haven't donated to presidential candidates. Out of all the universe of prosecutors that you used to work with, and I used to work with, and Johnny Ratcliffe used to work with, we can't find a dozen that haven't donated to major political candidates. And now we have Special Agent Strzok. It was the Inspector General, not the Department of Justice, not the Bureau who found these texts. It was the Inspector General. And I share your confidence in his objectivity. I share it. But it shouldn't have been the Inspector General that had to bring this to our attention 12 months after it happened. And that same agent is the one who reportedly interviewed Secretary Clinton in an interview that you and I have never seen conducted that way before. To have potential witnesses and potential targets sit in on a witness interview, I appreciate your professionalism and your unwillingness to want to say how unprecedented that is, so I'm not going to ask you. I'll just tell you, it's unprecedented. And that same agent is alleged to have been the one that changed the language. You're right, they are synonyms. Extremely careless is a synonym for grossly negligent, which begs the question, why change it? But you and I know why it was changed. It was changed because the statute says grossly negligent. And if you're not going to charge someone, God knows you don't want to track the statute with the language that you use. That would be stupid. What's also stupid is to do that memo to viewed the target. That memo was drafted before the last witness was interviewed. Director, it was drafted before the target of the investigation was even interviewed. Which makes people wonder, was the decision made before the interviews were finished? And now we believe that that same agent is also involved in the investigation into President Trump and his campaign, and may have interviewed Michael Flynn. That hasn't been confirmed, and we don't know what role, if any, he took in the preparation of documents for court filing. So I'm going to say this because I'm out of time, and I appreciate the chairman's patience with me. You have a really important job. When all else fails in this country, we want to be able to look to the FBI. We want to be able to look to the Department of Justice. When all the other institutions we trust, including Congress, appear to be broken, we want to be able to look to you. It's been a really bad 2 years. I am counting on you to help answer our questions in Congress, our fellow citizens' questions, but I am more than anything counting on you to go back to work for that blindfolded woman holding a set of scales that really doesn't give a whit about politics. That's the FBI that I want.
Time, gentleman, has
Mr.
expired.
Chairman,
The director
Mr.
is
Chairman,
welcome to respond.
Just a 30-second response. First, let me say, Congressman Gowdy, I'm well aware of your longstanding support for the Bureau and the Department, and I want you to know we appreciate it. And second, I want to assure you and every other member of this committee that there is no scenario under which I would have taken the President's nomination if I were not committed to the kind of independent, impartial, objective, and professional pursuit of the facts. I wouldn't be here if I weren't committed to that, and I can give this committee that commitment.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Richmond, for 5 minutes.
Director Ray, let me thank you for being here, but also thank you for the meeting we had a couple weeks ago. Let me ask you a question, because as I think about our approach to opioid addiction and how we combat this awful crisis, I also have to think back to our response to the crack epidemic and how we responded to the crack epidemic, which was mandatory minimum sentences, which led to mass incarceration. But one thing in specific example is that when we found grandchildren in public housing that may have had crack cocaine or cocaine, we filed eviction notices with housing authorities to remove them from public housing. That is not what we're doing with opioid addiction and people that we find in possession of opioids. Do you see and are you concerned about a double standard in our approach to opioid and our approach to our response to crack? And should we address that in criminal justice reform so that we treat substance abuse addiction as the mental health crisis that it is and that the president declared with his opioid crisis? So the question is, should we go back and look at how we treated crack and reform our old drug laws to better represent the mental health crisis?
Well, Congressman, questions of sentencing reform, criminal justice reform, I think are better directed to the other side of the street at the Justice Department than to the FBI, where we largely focus on trying to do the investigations and the intelligence assessments. But I will tell you that in the context of the opioid epidemic, which is upon us now, that it has become a sufficiently big scourge on all communities in the United States that it's clearly going to require a whole-of-government type response that involves not just criminal justice steps, aggressive investigation and prosecution, but all sorts of other outreach, mental health, treatment. There might have been a time when we could have investigated and prosecuted our way out of the problem, and that's clearly going to be a major part of it, but it's become too big now. We're going to have to do something that's much more holistic and multidisciplinary.
And, you know, life experiences mean a lot. And I heard my colleagues on the other side talk about how great the FBI has been and how it's held in high esteem except for the past 8 years under President Obama, and for Congressman Gowdy, he said the last 2 years. It just amazes me how we just missed the whole COINTELPRO history of the FBI, and that has to be one of its darkest moments when it did illegal surveillance and initiated propaganda in the media to discredit civil rights activists who were trying to make the country a better place. So let me just go there for a second. First, and I know that we just released a batch of documents from the Church Committee on JFK's assassination, but have we released and made public, in your knowledge, all of the documents and actions of the FBI during those COINTELPRO years?
Congressman, I don't actually know what information specifically has been provided on the COINTELPRO era. I know that hearings were conducted, books have been written, lots and lots of discussion has been had about it. Certainly, I will tell you that I think I and everybody in the Bureau recognizes the COINTELPRO problems, and that means different things to different people, as one of the darker moments in the FBI's history. And it's something we're not proud of, but it also is something that we've learned from. And during some of the same time period, there's a lot that the FBI did that we can all be proud of in terms of aggressive investigation of various civil rights abuses, among other things. So we're human. We make mistakes. We have things that we've done well. We have things we've done badly. And when we've done things badly, we try to learn from them.
And I would just hope that we expose as much as we can so we can learn from it. But who was the director of the FBI that initiated COINTELPRO and all of those programs that were the darker moments of the FBI's history?
Well, I believe Director Hoover was in place at the time.
And who's your building named after?
Director Hoover.
And it's the darker, or some of the darkest times of the FBI history under Hoover, and the building's named after him. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
The director is permitted to respond.
Well, I would just say that Director Hoover, like most of us mortals, did some things that he's probably not proud of wherever he is right now, and some things that we should be all very grateful to him for in terms of building the FBI into the organization it is today. So like most people, he's complicated.